Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about our factory tour of AAC Ammunition, which is owned by Palmetto State Armory. We did have the chance to tour their facilities when we were out there touring the factory, which we've already posted that video. You guys should follow us over on Twitter. Twitter has unshadow banned us and we're growing over there. So if you want the unfiltered Mac, you can pop by Twitter. I'll put a link in the video description below. All right, with all that being said, wow, what an impressive tour that was.
I know. I got to say, it was a really warm welcome. Jamin was there, one of the owners of PSA, and he was a great tour guide on that. He was really excited about that. He was really excited to bring ammunition to the market because, as we all know, as shooters, anytime there's a pandemic, anytime there's a panic, anytime there's anything, one of the first things to essentially disappear off the shelf is always ammunition. Always, because without it, the gun's essentially useless, right? And so, as we have all watched, what was that, back in 2013, the squirrel apocalypse took place where you couldn't get 22 for like 5 years. All this other stuff happened, right? And ammunition plants were always saying, we're working round the clock, 24/7. And you're just like, how do we still not have ammunition all throughout the country if you're working 24/7, right? And people would always ask, and then ammo companies would do these little videos to show you that they are, producing as fast as they can. Well, you got to think. Most of that stuff is generally one or two major players in the game, right?
Who have big military contracts.
Right, who have big military
Federal,
contracts.
Winchester.
They're feeding they're feeding that machine, and then they're also feeding the commercial machine, right? Whereas we've said before, Palmetto State Armory is one of those civilian first, government later, second, whatever, right? But they put the commercial market first, which is awesome. And so they want to spin up ammunition. And that's exactly what they did. And not only did they spin up ammunition, but they do the entire process.
Right.
Right. So, and when we got there, they were still building their primer house, which this is a key component in ammunition. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that holds ammunition back is the primers.
Yep.
Most people will tell you you'll have everything but the primers. And again, that is controlled by one or two major players of the game. So if they want to put you out of business, they just withhold primers.
Yep.
You got everything else, but no primers. Sorry.
And that's even hard on reloaders. We went through the pandemic when people had, bullets and powder and cases, but they couldn't get primers.
Yep. And so it's that same way. They withhold those primers. And now PSA, and we got to see, they're building the facilities to make their own primers, which is huge.
So I've toured big ammunition manufacturers, like state agencies that manufacture ammunition for their military, right? MKE would be a perfect example of that. And the machines I've seen at those types of facilities were, you could tell they were government in nature, right? One big, like a football field long machine. You pour raw materials in one end and then it spits out completed cartridges on the other end. But it had inherent flaws that I saw with that system, because if something goes down in the middle of that machine, it takes the whole line down. And those machines are expensive. And so I was really curious when we went in to look at how they were doing it, because they're doing modern manufacturing, again, from the ground up. The same thing I saw at the foreign military factories. You start off with a brass cup, and that brass cup gets stretched and pulled and reshaped.
It started as strips. Right? It's a spool, essentially, of brass strips, which then they go through the processes of the cup, the forming of a case. They literally at Palmetto make it from raw materials, that case. Even the bullet. So they had the lead for the bullet,
the copper,
the raw lead, which then they would put into little slugs, chunks, and then each machine would have its steps to where it eventually turns it into a full-on projectile.
Jacketed bullet, yes.
Exactly, a jacketed projectile. Then they also had the machines where it started with brass strips, raw brass strips, that then through its processes would have a case. And then they're also got the primer. They're going to make their own primers. They also got a powder house, which stores all their tens of thousands of pounds of powder that they would need to manufacture this stuff. But that's the thing. They're doing the whole kit and caboodle.
Right. All of it. Up. And what's interesting is, where those military machines were all in one big unit. So if, say one of the steps is, stretching that brass puck out into a case, say that part of the machine goes down, takes the entire line down. Well, what AAC and what Palmetto State Armory have done is they've separated those different processes. So if the brass extrusion machine, there's multiple extrusion steps, right, to shape it and to cut it and stuff. But let's say one of those machines goes down. It doesn't take the rest of the facility down.
Right.
They can still make more bullets and cut more lead and ingots and, brass, and everything they can do around that one machine being down.
It's still
so
processing.
When it comes, right. Yep. So you're not getting an entire backlog. I really thought that was interesting that they would take that approach, because I was expecting them to have what these big state machines were. And I always thought that was a glitch in the design of those big state-run machines and facilities. And sure enough, that's how they're doing it where it's not one big process, that they can break it all out. And again, as you said, they're doing it from zero to full-on completed cartridge, which is not what I expected. I expected to see Starline supplying cases, and Hornady, which they do work with Hornady and stuff like that too, just like everybody does for match bullets or Sierra bullets.
Exactly. Most companies are going to work with a different company for their projectiles because it's a known projectile.
Right.
Sierra bullets. I mean, it's a great match-grade bullet. Burger bullets, Hornady bullets, all that stuff is definitely, all companies deal with that.
But they're making their own ball rounds, which are the really cost-effective side of things. And that, again, goes back to their philosophy that we saw on the firearms side of the house, right? Let's cut out the middleman, cut out the distributors, cut out all this other stuff and just go direct to consumer. We make it, sell it to you. And that cuts out a couple of different points where other folks have to make profits. And that's how they keep the price down. People automatically assume low price, cheap junk, right? No, there are things you can do to get the prices down to be more competitive. And we're talking a few cents per round, but when you're talking, thousands of rounds, that adds up pretty darn quickly.
Right.
And so the fact that they go direct to the consumer, just like they do with the firearms, that cuts out those other points of markup, which keeps the cost of the ammunition down. Now, we had a chance to go out with some of their match grade 5.56 stuff, with some of their match grade ARs that they built everything in-house, the ammunition and the guns, and we were out at 1,000 yards shooting their 77 grain stuff and ring and steel every single shot.
Right. So they essentially made their own recipe of a very popular 77 grain loading by another company, right? And a lot of people want that round. They do. They love that 77 grain. It has great terminal performance at range. It's an incredible round out of a 5.56. And so they have essentially, made or cloned, if you will, this very popular 77 grain. I think it's Mark 262 or something like that.
But they've tweaked it considerably.
And it performed exceptionally well. And the cool part is we literally were just taking this right out of the fresh made, right off the shelf into the van, went to a range, which was a beautiful club, right?
Yeah.
It was a shooting club. And I don't think PSA owns the club, but I think the club really likes
They
having
work with
PSA
them pretty closely.
there
Yeah,
because
there's a
of events
relationship.
and things of that. But it was a great shooting club that had up to a mile to shoot at, or maybe even a mile and a half. It was incredible. And we were out there shooting, and we got patches from it, the 1,000-yard 5.56 patch. People will say, you can't do it. Well, we did it multiple times.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but we were shooting at 700 yards with the stuff and just printing this nice little circle that you could see forming on the plate out there in the rain. It was raining out there, using a PSA rifle with a PSA barrel with a PSA ammo. And so it was definitely neat to see the capabilities of their ammunition. But not only didn't stop there either, with the 223. They brought out the popular cartridges, right? 300 blackout, 5.56, and I believe 5.7.
5.7 they're working on, and they're saying that it's going to be, well under $1 a round, which is the current going price for the cheapest stuff you can find for 5.7. They're trying to make 5.7 popular again. Right. Because when it first came out, it was popular, but the cost has always been, and I think a lot of that has been driven by the fact that there's only a handful of guns that chamber it. We're seeing more guns coming out for it now. And so it's becoming more mainline. So it makes sense that they would step into that space. And if they can do that, that's awesome. And another area that they're working on that they hope to have up fairly soon is the steel case side, right? So we already know that the Russian imports of ammunition, steel case 5.45 by 39, 7.62 by 39, once those Form 6s are filled, there will be no more ammunition coming out of Russia. It's gone, probably for the rest of our lives. And so PSA went to the time and expense, because this hasn't really been done in any great capacity in the United States prior to this.
Right.
To punch steel cases, right? It's completely different processes and machines required to do it. It's not just a matter of putting steel versus brass into the same machines and getting, it doesn't work that way.
Right. No.
These are dedicated machines that are meant to make, steel cased ammunition, which historically speaking, steel-cased ammunition was even used by the United States at one point. I mean, it's just a cheap, cost-effective way to mass produce tons of ammunition using mild steel versus brass. Brass is an expensive commodity. And so anyway, the fact that they're doing that is going to give us our 5.45 and 7.62 by 39s. And who knows? Maybe they'll go, Makarov later, and maybe they'll do, I don't know. Who knows what they're thinking? But I think it's really cool that they're going to give the American shooters that steel-cased ammunition back.
Right.
Now, is it going to be as cheap as the old Russian stuff? Probably not when the Russian stuff was in its heyday. I mean, you got a comm-block country just churning out just tons of junk ammo, and that's really what it was. Like the Tula and stuff is just...
Their machines are paid for 16 times over.
Right. It's been there since the Cold War. There's no R&D. It's just simply just pouring in stuff. And every once in a while, to this day, I'll get corrosive primed Tula or Wolf, and it'll just happen. I'm like, darn it! And you'll start to see the rust accumulating a few days after you shoot it.
And mind you, it says non-corrosive on the box.
Oh, it always does.
Right?
and they somehow Ivan has one too many bottles of vodka, and they dig out some Cold War era primers and like, the Americans, they don't care. They just stick it in there.
Yep, absolutely.
So you won't have any of that going on. You'll have quality steel-cased ammunition. It'll be interesting to see what we can do if they'll do a match line. A match 5.45 and a match 7.62. I know they were talking about it, but
308 and 6.5 Creedmoor, they do intend to do, the 308 and 6.5 Creed also, match ball. They also intended to do, I believe, handgun cartridges like, 9.45, things of that. The steel case, big one, 5.45, 7.62. That's big, but that all obviously takes time, right?
Right.
This is all, as I'm sure most of you know, watching this video right now, know that this is you're starting to see this pop. And there was a lot of questions like, who's AAC?
Right.
What is that? Even I said it, right? I remember watching this pop on an ammo distributor. I'm like, who's AAC? I don't know if I trust that. You know what I mean? And then I found out after touring when we went, I'm like, holy cow, it's Palmetto State Armory. This is their ammo brand. And then after trying some, I'm quite impressed. As a matter of fact, I was picking up all the brass cases. I was like a little brass goblin when we were out there shooting at the range, because I wanted to bring some home to my reloader buddy and actually keep loading and loading and loading and loading.
See how many loads you can get on it.
Because he'll be able to tell me how well the brass is and all that stuff, how many loads we can get out of it. And
they're doing everything right.
Yeah.
Right. So when you watch the process of them, like stretching the brass and cutting the rims, all this stuff, it constantly goes to annealing. They're making sure the brass doesn't get too brittle. There's constant, every single step of the way, there's QC checks every single step of the way. And, they even have the auto boxing at the end, stuff I saw at much larger, well, can't say much larger, what I would think would be much larger factories like MKE or, CZ, stuff like that. These guys can compete with some of the biggest dogs out there. They're cranking out millions of rounds a week already, and they're just getting spun up. When we were there, remember they're putting a new 9mm line in, and it was just polished concrete and all these guys bustling about. And James said, by the end of tomorrow, they should have it up and running. Yeah. I was like,
they're working.
Wow. I mean, they're like moving this massive amounts, multi-ton equipment in, bolting it down, turning it on, spooling it up, getting the programs going.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're immediately turning up that line. And so, they're doubling the production capabilities of their most popular lines, and probably quadruple at some point. But when we were there, they were doubling the production capabilities of their 9mm. Right. 300 blackout. Again, if you buy this stuff right off the website, this 125 grain stuff, I want to say it was like 68 cents a round or something like that. Which is
incredibly cheap, because I want to say 300 blackout is still hovering around that 90 cents to $1 a shot.
And that's about where their subsonic stuff is on their website. But the price will start to come down as they start to spin up more machines.
Right.
And that's why I really want to support their ammo efforts, because it's been quality ammo from what we've seen so far. And we've seen the production facilities. It's all brand new machines. This isn't 1940s technology like, Aguila down in Mexico, had a whole wing. And Federal does this too, has an entire wing of just machines that were used during like World War II to produce ammunition. And they can spin it up to make 7.62 by 39 every once in a while if they need to, but that's, you don't really want to use that old equipment. And then when new ammo manufacturers come up that you've never heard of before, many times they're buying this old machinery from these old producers, and that's what they're making the ammo on. Or they're just using Dillon presses and they're just automating as much as they can.
Right.
But what AAC and Palmetto State Armory are doing is full-on manufacturing, just like everything else.
State-of-the-art machines. And not only that, because I remember I want to say you asked or I asked, one of us did, like, how long did it take to get these machines? And it's like, it's time-consuming, right? Because they come out of a different country, if you will. They're manufactured and then they're shipped. It takes almost a year and a half or something like that for the machines to essentially get put on that concrete floor. So this has been something that's been going,
Right.
over a time frame. And it's nice to see because now there's a new competitor in town. And that, as a consumer, is what we want to see, right? Because
they make
now,
other companies competitive.
if they're making everything,
Yep.
they now have to force the other companies to be competitive in pricing. And so that's going to help bring those costs down for us as shooters so we can go out and enjoy more. Because I don't know about you, when I go target shooting nowadays and I break out a few boxes of ammo, I'm like, $50.
I know.
I don't know. You know what I mean?
I'm doing the math in my head too. Like
Yep.
any of my match ammo and stuff that we don't get
Right.
from Federal or from anybody else, we have to buy.
Right.
It hurts, man. It's not like all of our ammo comes to us for free either.
Right.
Our fun ammo is out of pocket.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it is not pleasant. So it's nice to see that AAC out there that is the same AAC that you think it is. They purchased the name when the Freedom Group collapsed. PSA snagged the name AAC and they renamed it from Advanced Armament Corp to America's Ammunition Company,
Which is awesome.
And
again, they were using good machines. I remember watching the QC, the little laser machine, just sitting there watching these rounds, and it would kick them to good, bad, and how fast it was going. It was just mind blowing how quickly the technology can sit there and go, yes, 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 no, 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 yes.
Yeah,
no,
literally the loaded case was sliding past a laser.
Yeah.
And the laser would just see it, would scan it as it slid past the trough, headed to the bin to get loaded into a box.
Yeah.
And a little arm's like, nope, rejected. Don't like you.
And then once it's done, once they get the completed boxes, that's the other thing too, is it's all in-house. Packaging, everything, put to the warehouse. They ship it from there and everything. Again, everything to shave the cost.
Yeah.
Too cool.
It was amazing. So if you guys haven't seen our video talking about the firearms manufacturing, please check it out. It's actually quite eye-opening to see what a U.S. producer of modern firearms looks like in the United States. And then, of course, today we showed you the other part of the tour where we toured the ammunition factory, which was in a separate facility. Their facilities are sprawling. We love the philosophy of the company. They want to arm citizens. They turn their backs to government contracts in favor of civilian sales.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think speaks volumes to the character of the ownership of PSA and AAC Ammunition and all the other stuff that we've talked about over the last few videos. All right, guys, if you enjoyed the video today, please consider becoming part of our Patreon family. When we made the trip out there, Jason drove his car and I put the gas in it.
Yep.
We get there through your support, and you can do that via Patreon. There is a link in the video description below. Check us out on Twitter. I already mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but that's where you're going to get the Unfiltered Mac. I talk about all sorts of stuff over there. Check it out. Link in the video description below. Right here underneath the video player you're watching right now, there's a little join button. Mash that join button, and you can support us here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. And last but not least, swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 14 years of support. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care, guys.